get the check down, and in open space gets brought down by Jamal Adams. Now they send him in motion. Some patience there from Ridley, but not a lot of room to go.
Welcome to the latest podcast. Rob Staton and Robbie Williams with you here as the off-season is well and truly underway. The Senior Bowl has been and gone already, and the time is just flying by. It's February. Before long, it'll be free agency, and then it'll be the draft, and then there'll be that long, boring bit where nothing happens until the new season kicks into gear with training camp later in the summer. But we're here to talk a bit about Seahawks, bit of free agency talk, bit of Matt Stafford to the Rams talk as well. And we'll finish off with a Super Bowl prediction. But Robbie, I want to start with this. Now, one of the big storylines that is going to really dominate, I think, the offseason. I can sense that eventually this will. It's not at the moment, it's kind of quiet, but eventually this is going to really pick up pace. And that is the Jamal Adams contract situation. Now, everybody kind of, I think people are turning a blind eye to this a little bit. They kind of just assume that, well, you know, something's going to work out eventually, and no one's really talking about it or wondering what's going to happen there. We have talked about it an awful lot, and I think it warrants being talked about. Now, I'm going to play a little video here. This was Jamal Adams speaking in the week on a podcast, and here he is talking about his expectations for his next contract.
Obviously, I'm just a football player at the end of the day. I classify. There's not too many football players that are in the league to where he's like, oh, you know what, that person can play anything on the field because he loves football. He's a football player. He can do it all. There's not too many, so it's gonna be interesting, man. I ain't gonna get into too much, but it's gonna be interesting to see. But for me, bro, I'm not really even. I'll be honest, bro. I'm not even stressing about it, bro. I'm not even like, I got like a clear space up top, man. Like I'm focused on my craft. I'm focused on family time. I'm focused on creating memories with my boys because life is just precious, man. That's what I'm looking at. You know what I mean? Like my time is going to come. It's going to eventually come. And when it comes, it's going to be special, man. You know what I mean? I don't stress about things like that. You know, those things handle itself. I believe that I put out enough film over the years to show you what type of guy in person I am, what type of player I am. You know what I mean? You just, to me, you ain't gonna find no better, but hey, man, at the end of the day, I get it, man. Business is business, bro. It's never personal. But man, it's gonna be interesting to see, man.
So there we go. There's Jamal Adams talking about his contract situation, Robbie. And so the interesting thing to me is one that he refers to his, kind of says it's going to be an interesting situation. And the other is he's kind of going in the direction that some people have suggested he might do, which is that to him, being paid the highest safety salary might not be enough. That would be about $16 million. It would be more than Budda Baker, who's about $14.75 million. And he's talking more in terms of being almost a complete defender, or, that maybe he wants to be paid at the top defensive back, which is currently Jalen Ramsey and $20 million a year. What do you make of this?
I mean, it's interesting. I think from his perspective, he probably sees himself, with the sacks and pass rushing, and not that he's that great in coverage, anyways. But he does drop back in coverage, and I can see where he's probably coming from as being a complete player. But I mean, he's not going to get Jalen Ramsey money. That's silly. He's not that good in coverage. I mean, there's a difference between being a complete player and being, a lockdown corner. And so, I think he can say all he wants, and he's going to try to drive up his price as much as he can, and that's just player doing their own negotiation. I mean, but I think what he talks about, it's going to be interesting. I think part of the interesting thing is that with the salary cap, being, I guess, suggested around 185. I mean, the players know that this is going to be a different year, and with way things are going, I mean, he might not get his money this year, and it might come next year. And if it's with the Seahawks, granted, my guess would be that they're going to extend him, instead of just flat out giving him a new contract and taking a big hit of money this year, they'll probably try to lower the cap hit this year and then, bring some of that money forward the following year would be my guess. So I think that's why it's the interesting part of, having this season be what it is with the whole COVID thing and no fans and those kind of things. I just think that's probably what he means. But yeah, I mean, I can't really blame the guy for really wanting to sell himself to get maximum dollar. But I mean, let's be right here. He's not Jalen Ramsey. He's not going to get a lockdown corner price, and he can say as much as he wants, doesn't mean he's going to get it, and he's not going to get that from any other team. So I mean, if that's the case, I mean, this is where it gets interesting because if we start a negotiation process, which I'm guessing we probably will, this is where it starts to get interesting. You start doing the negotiation with him, you start seeing where he's at, mentally, and wanting that financial, what kind of financial agreement is he looking at, and that's when you decide, hey, he's not worth it, you trade him, or whatever, you're like, okay, the price is, he's actually being reasonable, and you try to sign him to an extension.
Well, there's this huge assumption, Robbie, that that he's going to stay, and there's a lot of people who are very dismissive of this idea that he might be traded and stuff like that. And look, I see where those people are coming from. Their argument is always, well, they didn't trade 2 first-round picks, a third, and Bradley McDougald for Jamal Adams and a fourth to have him for 1 year and then trade him away at a much more discounted price. I understand that argument, but I also think it's a bit naive when you consider the contract situation. You've got Jamal Adams here suggesting that he might want a slightly higher deal than just to be the best paid safety, which is fine. As you said, it's his prerogative to do that. This is the time to sort of make those noises in the media, because this is the kind of the pre-negotiation period when you kind of set the stall out for what you want, and then it's about me in the middle. It's why, so the Seahawks will be here, Jamal Adams will be here. It's whether they can both get to here. That's essentially what goes on at this point. But what is realistic, and that's how the way that Jamal Adams is going to have to feel about this is, because I don't think the Seahawks are going to be willing to pay him $18 to $20 million. And even if, let's say, for example, Bobby Wagner was traded or whatever and stuff like that, and all of a sudden his salary came off the books, I still don't think the Seahawks would be willing to pay Jamal Adams $18 to $20 million. They've been very firm on what they are willing to pay certain players. We saw that with Jadeveon Clowney. We saw that with Sheldon Richardson. We've seen that with other players who they've had and then they've let move on. So I think they will set a limit, which is the right thing to do, and that will be their point with their limit. And then they've got to make a call to make if Jamal Adams wants to go above that. Here's the reality of the situation with Jamal Adams is that he may well say that I'm a complete defender and I'm this, that, and the other. I think he is in a pretty weak negotiating position, Robbie, because he will use the 9.5 sacks as his leverage point. Anybody who knows anything at the most basic level of NFL football, who is willing to look beyond the, treating the Seahawks like they're the band One Direction and you are a teenager, will be able to see that there's a reason why those sacks came about. We've talked about it an awful lot. The Seahawks would telegraph when they were going to blitz Jamal Adams by just having him run up to the line. There was no creativity. He's not beating offensive linemen. He's not really doing anything tricky. He's getting a free run to the quarterback when they show a gap pressure. That's just the way it is. So that one, the Seahawks can really kind of bat away as a negotiating point. Here's what Adams has had. He's had injuries, multiple injuries this year, which impacts his leverage. He's graded, PFF have actually changed their grades. I don't know if this is to account for the games in the playoffs or not, but he's now rated not the 45th best safety in football in 2020, but the 52nd best safety in 2020. 52nd best graded safety. Whatever your opinions are of PFF, and I know there's a mixed view there, that ain't good at any level. I mean, it's not like, whoops, we forgot to carry the one. He's actually the 5th best safety. He's the 52nd best safety. His coverage grade, a 52.5, which is just abysmal, frankly. And the Seahawks are going to have to look at those numbers, and if they look at PFF or their own grading, they're going to have to make a call here, Robbie, because you simply cannot justify paying 16, 17, 18, 19, $20 million for a blitzer. You ask somebody else to do that at a cheaper cost. It's about everything else. And if he isn't delivering the kind of impact that a top pass rusher or a Jalen Ramsey, the thing about Ramsey, shuts down your best receiver. We've seen him with DK Metcalf. You see someone like a Bosa brother getting after the quarterback and the way that impacts game plans. Laramie Tunsil, all right, Houston's a mess right now, but they needed a left tackle. They have a left tackle for the next few years, a good, young, quality left tackle. At no point ever does a team set out, we just need a franchise safety. That's never a point. That's never really the position that you should be investing huge amounts of picks and money. You've just got to find someone who can make that position work for you. And when you combine all of this, the expectation of Adams and what he was going to get, also the leverage that he has because the Seahawks have already spent all their picks on him, then the Seahawks having to look at how he grades out, having to consider the injuries, having to consider their salary cap situation. They're now $2 million over the cap for next year, according to Over the Cap, because of the bonuses that are kicking in now for people like Michael Dixon and DK Metcalf. They're over the cap for 2021. All of these things exist and are going to set the stall for a really difficult negotiation. And I don't think enough people are acknowledging how difficult this could be, Robbie.
I mean, it could be super difficult when you start the actual negotiation process. But I mean, and one thing that Jamal Adams has for leverage is he can say, okay, well, you can say the 9.5 sacks were you or whatever, but you gave up 2 first-round picks, a third, and a player for me. This is where, do you want to waste that, that draft capital plus a player and not pay me? And this is where kind of the leverage comes from him. But, it's interesting. I think that, this is going to be one of those topics that I think will kind of dominate the offseason, kind of like the Jadeveon Clowney thing. But the nice thing about this situation is that, regardless, and I know what he said with the Jets, that he could, that he wants to be a Jet for life or whatever. And then he, wants to be paid and said he wouldn't play or whatever. But we do have him under contract for the year. If negotiations don't work out and we can't find a trade partner, he still has to be on the team, and we have him for like $9 million this season. And it's, so it's, I think there's a little bit less blow on that. And I mean, it could dominate into the, going into training camp and him holding out and those kind of things. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, I don't want to get too far down the road with that, but it's something that could definitely go in that direction. And you could see it happening with a guy like Jamal Adams. I mean, you've seen it already happen with the Jets, but I mean, it's kind of nice that he's already currently under contract for one more year regardless. But I mean, how terrible it would be to be honest with you, if he plays this year out and we get nothing for him. Right. And he just walks, right. We don't franchise tag him or anything like that. And he just walks and we lose a player. I mean, Bradley McDougald was a pretty good player for us, and, 2 first-round picks and a third. And all of a sudden you're like, that was just a waste for 2 years. And you're at his position for what we gave up was not worth the draft capital. And so, yeah, I mean, we need to get back into this draft. I don't know if that is Jamal Adams or Bobby or whoever it might be. And there's a lot of discussion going around on that. And it's going to be interesting to see exactly what we do. But I think they will start negotiation process with him. I don't think they're just going to outright trade him. I just don't think that's what they're going to do. I'm in that boat where I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm not saying it won't. I think they're going to try to negotiate with him. And I think if things get sour and they just don't think they can meet his price, I think that's when they'll start looking at trading him.
So I've got a couple of points there. I mean, I think here's the thing, right? So why did it fall apart with the Jets? Because people think, it's because the Jets were a bad team and Jamal's just such a damn competitor that he needed to get somewhere where he could win. No, he was saying, I want to be here. We've sorted our differences out. The Jets were saying they wanted him to be a Jet for life. It all got spoiled because they would not pay him what he wanted. It's as simple as that. Now, here we are, a year on, and he has played for a year for the Seahawks, and he's set the sacks record, as he will keep mentioning. And there's no excuse for the Seahawks. There's no excuse for them not to pay him. And if they don't pay him, he's going to be pissed off. He's going to want to know why. I just don't think it's realistic for Jamal Adams to be told, well, Jamal, yeah, what it is we're not sure on you. So actually what we want you to do is play another season, and then maybe we'll pay you. It's just that we're not sure that we like you enough yet. So can you wait 12 more months and not get the big payday and potentially get a serious injury, which then stops you getting that big payday? Would you like to do that? He's going to tell them to get royally stuffed. And, whether or not he can hold out for a whole season or not, I doubt that, because who can hold out unless you're Le'Veon Bell and daft enough to hold out for a whole season and cost yourself money and the poor leverage and everything. Eventually he would have to come back. But here's what you get for, there's no like last laugh for the Seahawks if that happens, because what do you get then? You get a whole off season of drama. You get a whole off season of distraction. You maybe get Jamal Adams coming in and doing what old Thomas did and said, well, I'll practice when I want to because I need to save myself for my payday next year. You get stuff like that. You get all of that drama, which quite frankly, why would you want to be interested in any of that? And then even if he plays the whole season because he's such a football guy and all that, you get to next year, then what? What if he has a similar season? Do you trade him then, having lost his value? Do you franchise tag him and then he holds out again? I mean, it's just, it could be a mess. And this is why I think you have to make a call now. You either have to say, this is the guy we traded for. We love him. We love everything about him. We believe that he's the future of this defense. Here's the money that it's going to take to tie you down for 4 more years after this year. You have to do that. No ifs or buts. There's no waiting. There's no holding out on this. You pay him or you trade him for me. And in my opinion, you trade him. I think it was a stupid trade. I'm happy to say it. I think in hindsight, at the time, I was dubious of it. But how can you not be excited about a big trade? Any football fan, you're going to be excited about a trade. You want to see it work out. You want to see a new player who's a big name playing for you. In hindsight, it was a stupid trade because they've given up way too much. They're now in this conundrum where do you pay a safety huge money or not? It's going to go down. I mean, I just think the ceiling for Jamal Adams is that he's a good player and that he will make plays in games, but he's never going to be the player that elevates a whole defense, not for me, to a Super Bowl. And the Seahawks, for me, would be better off, as I've said in my article that I wrote about what I would do this offseason, is shifting their resource, because there's too much in the linebacker and the safety position, Robbie. To be paying Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright $25 million last year, and then a first-round pick in Jordan Brooks, and having traded up in round 3 of the year before for Cody Barton, all of that investment in the linebacker position, it's far too much. And then you look at the safety position, a second-round pick on Marquise Blair, a fifth-round pick on Quandre Diggs and inheriting his salary. You paid Bradley McDougald last year, and then you trade him to go and get Jamal Adams and to potentially pay him nearly $20 million a year and 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for Jamal Adams. I mean, that's a ridiculous, nonsensical amount of resource that has gone into 2 positions, which most of the league would say, we'll just fine, guys. We'll get someone who can run, who can play linebacker and hit. We'll find someone who can cover a bit, run a bit, hit a bit, to play safety. We know where football is won. And right now, in this form of the league, it's quarterback, it's weapons, it's cornerbacks who can stymie those weapons, and it's your trenches. And the Seahawks have put the money and picks into linebacker and safety. And here's the worst thing for me, Robbie, and this is why I wrote what I wrote last week. You've spent a first-round pick on a linebacker, a middle linebacker at that. Why are you paying Bobby Wagner $17 million this year and $20 million next if you're paying the first-round pick for a player at his position? It's time to just move on to Jordan Brooks. Otherwise, don't make the Jordan Brooks pick. Likewise for Marquise Blair. Pete Carroll loves Marquise Blair. You spent a second-round pick on him. It's time to show why you spent that pick on him and why you like him so much by making him your starting strong safety and trading Jamal Adams, saving yourself a load of money, and then taking those picks that you get and taking that money you'll get and say, here you go O-line, here you go D-line, here you go quarterback position. That's where we need to invest. That is what is going to take this team back to a Super Bowl. Final point, Robbie. When is the last time a team went to the Super Bowl with most of their resource in linebacker and safety? The Seahawks have got a $35 million quarterback. They need to protect him and make his life better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. My only argument against trading these players and letting Marquise Blair or whoever play, because that's where we drafted them, or Cody Barton, letting him come up and taking KJ's spot. Like, would you drop Carlos Dunlap and his 14 million just because you drafted LJ Collier in the first round? I mean, like, that would be my only argument. Like, right, it's the same concept. If you take the same concept and apply it, then you should drop Carlos Dunlap because he's worth 14 million. Drop him and then let LJ Collier play defensive end because, hey, we spent a first round pick on him. You gotta let him play. So that's my only argument. We've seen these guys play. In my opinion, I would rather re-sign KJ and keep Cody Barton on the sideline. I mean, we've seen enough of him already. I just don't think it's going to work out. And like Marquise Blair, I think he could be a good player, but he hasn't shown that he can stay healthy either. So I mean, there's a lot of what ifs with some of these ideas. And I love the idea of beefing up the O-line, protecting Russ, going and getting like a third weapon. I mean, this would be awesome if we could actually manage that. But I just like that you're weakening an area as well. Like, right. I mean, you can't, I mean, in my opinion, I just don't think Marquise Blair is as good as player as Jamal Adams. I just don't. Like, I mean, clearly they did draft him in the second round. I think Jamal Adams does have some talent, but you just can't I don't think it's just a plug and play and you see it be, that you're going to see no difference. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't blitz Marquise Blair as much as you blitz Jamal Adams and he won't get that 9.5 sacks. I'm not saying that. He probably could, but I just don't know if like the talent is there as far as like run stopping ability and I mean his coverage ability is probably better, but Cody Barton clearly is not better than KJ Wright, and by any stretch of the mean. I mean, yeah, you could probably go find a linebacker to play that position, but I mean that's not always the case. We have that linebacker. I mean, we've seen Ben hasn't even played at all, and I don't know why. And he looked like he was going to be a great pickup out of the University of Washington. I thought maybe he's just a little bit small, but that would be it. And he hasn't played a lick other than special teams. And then I think Cody Barton has done a great job on special teams, but we've seen what happens when he's actually playing in the game. So my only argument against that would be just like you've seen these guys play, you just don't know if like I don't want to make our defense worse by just trading guys so we can get the draft capital and possibly build up. I mean, there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to sign some of these guys that we want to anyways, right? I mean, these guys could get more money from another team. Who knows where we're putting our value in, but I do like the idea of building up that own line because I mean, it is one in the trenches. I'd like to see us go out and get a stud defensive tackle as well and help Poona Ford and Jaron Reed and get a good rotation, but we're going to run into the same problem. I mean, we have to decide what to do with Carlos Dunlap and, do we extend him and maybe lower the cap hit a little bit this year and push that money later? Or, I mean, if we cut him, then we run into the same problem of what we had last year and we don't have any defensive ends that can blitz the passer. And so, yeah, I mean, we're going to run into a lot of issues and we have to get after the passer, right? I mean, we'll be talking about the same thing that we were talking about earlier in the seasons. We can't get after the quarterback and that's going to cost us games.
So on the point of, would you just get rid of Carlos Dunlap because they drafted LJ Collier, because that's the same argument as you've drafted Jordan Brooks, get rid of Bobby, and you've drafted Marquise Blair, get rid of Jamal Adams. What I would say to that is that it's about the position though, isn't it? What my point is that they've invested too much in linebacker and safety, and they need to convert that into the trenches. Carlos Dunlap is a trenches player. So I wouldn't get rid of Carlos Dunlap for that reason. He's a player in the area that I think they need to pump their resources into. So it's slightly different in that regard. And the other thing that I would say is that Pete Carroll never really praises LJ Collier. He never goes out of his way to say, that is my LJ's singing, he looks amazing and all this. We're so happy with that pick. With Jordan Brooks, he says, that's exactly what we were looking for. He's exactly the kind of player. Marquise Blair, he's amazing. He's doing this. And we were so excited about him and he's great. And we can't wait to get him back and all this. So, they clearly like Marquise Blair. They clearly like Jordan Brooks. I think they know that that Collier is not the same level of player. So again, I want to put more talent and resource into the D-line. So I'm keeping Carlos Dunlap. In terms of his $14 million salary, I still think you need to get that down. My point in the article that I would raise again here is that if you trade Bobby Wagner, you create $20 million for 2022. And if you trade Jamal Adams, you potentially create another 18 million. That is $38 million you'll be saving on the 2022 salary cap. So in that scenario, for me, I'd happily extend Carlos Dunlap another year and lower his cap hit this year. And I would do the same for Jaron Reed, to lower their cap hits and ensure that probably your two best defensive linemen are lowering their caps, but they're still here. And let's not forget with Carlos Dunlap, he transformed the D-line when he came in. So I think you have to keep him. You have to keep Jaron Reed. And I'd rather do that and create resources to maybe invest even more in that line and on the O-line than having that money at linebacker and at safety. And on the Cody Barton thing, I don't want him to start either, because we've all seen Cody Barton. I think he's a special teams guy. But it's just, yeah, I'm looking at a cap situation. It's not like last year when they had, tens of millions of dollars to spend. I mean, they spent about $50 million in free agency. They're $2 million over the cap. And they're going to have to create money somewhere. I mean, they're just, at the moment, they can't even give Poona Ford a dime to be a second round 10 and restricted free agent. They can't even do that. So they need to create money from somewhere. Something's got to give here. And the idea that anybody could come back, KJ, Carson, Shaquille, right now just isn't realistic until they start saving money from somewhere. So unless they're going to trade Bobby or trade Jamal or trade some Carlos Dunlap or Jaron Reed or do any of these things, none of these things are happening. We just have to be realistic. And if it means having to play Barton, you're going to have to do that at the moment, or BBK, because they don't have any option. I mean, what I would say to that is I think you can get a linebacker. I think you can find a linebacker. And Quan Alexander, okay, he's had a rough couple of years, in San Francisco with the injury and then New Orleans, and they're going to move on from him. You might be able to get him for practically nothing next year on a prove-it deal. And if you said to me, would you rather have Quan Alexander and Jordan Brooks at linebacker? Or would you rather be paying $27 million for KJ and Bobby? I love KJ and Bobby. I don't want to see KJ and Bobby playing elsewhere. But I want to see the Seahawks win a Super Bowl. I don't want to see us keep the old guys around, the good old boys forever, because they can't possibly play anywhere else. And, us turn around in 3 years and have not won a playoff game or not done anything in the postseason and wishing we'd mixed it up a little bit. I think we need to do something different. We need to see something different. And I keep coming back to it. O-line. Build it up, man. Build that up. You've got a $35 million quarterback. $1 million quarterback. Make his life easier. One more weapon, at least. A better O-line. Get him a running game. Spend a pick on a good running back who can actually carry this thing. You don't have to mother throughout the whole season. And then on defense, fill your holes with young, fast, cheap, angry players. Get him on a Zoom, Robbie, at the combine. Are you an angry guy? Yes, right. Are you fast? Yes, I run a 4.4. Great. Are you going to hit a MF in the face over and 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 over? Right, you've got the job. We're spending a 5th round pick on you. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Let's go get it. Like I love the idea of getting those guys who are just angry and fast and playing with the triple. I mean, that's how we built the LOB, right? We got a bunch of guys who were late round picks, and we definitely have the ability to do it again. I'm not saying we don't, but another interesting aspect to this though too, Rob, is the fact that so many teams are in these salary cap issues, and there's going to be a lot of guards that are going to be on the market that are becoming available. I think there's a lot of, like, I'm here looking at NFL trade rumors, and they kind of got this thing about potential cap casualties for each team, and I'm seeing a lot of guards out there that would fit really well on our scheme, and they're being paid too much this year, and teams are just in a situation where they're going to have to do some things, and it'll be interesting to see who's actually available when it comes to that time. So you never know. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could get a lot of guys maybe on the cheap, if they want to come play for Russ or Pete or whatever, and that's kind of one of the bonuses about having Pete Carroll, is he's a player's coach, so people do like him, and you got Russ and who doesn't want to play with him, and hopefully we'll see what happens. I mean, I can't disagree that I think trading Jamal or Bobby would be, a good thing. It's just hard to imagine. And for me, I'd like to, if I'm being honest, I would like to see them bring KJ back. I don't know what it would take. I don't think his market is going to be as hot as he probably imagines it is. I don't even think he'll probably make as much as he made this year, especially with the salary cap. So I think there's a possibility to get him back, maybe on a 2-year deal to bring him back just to retire as a Seahawk. And it's not because I'm like being a homerish and I don't want to see the Seahawks win the Super Bowl and want them just to bring the old guys back, but I just think he played well enough and he just embodies kind of what you want for the team. And, and I'm not saying Bobby doesn't, but you're right. I mean, he's a 32-year-old middle linebacker that's being paid way too much. And at that point, you have to look at, being realistic with what your team and what you can get for it. And, I don't think we'll get, I don't think anybody's going to give us more than maybe a 4th for Bobby. I really don't. Maybe a 3rd, but it'll be interesting to see. And if we do pull that off, I think that'd be a hard pill for John Snyder and Pete Carroll to swallow if they were going on the right. Because I think they love Bobby, and I think everyone does, right? I mean, that he's been he's one of those guys that came in and from Utah and was just great, and you want to see that, and he's been great for the Seattle community and such. But you're right. At this cost, you have to think about the long term and what it means for your team. So I mean, I'm not disregarding that by any means.
I think sort of my final point on this would be is I just wish if the Seahawks were fully intending, Robbie, to have Bobby Wagner for the next 2 years and maybe beyond, and KJ Wright for the beyond or whatever, then they just shouldn't have taken Jordan Brooks. They should have spent that pick on somebody else so that I talked about it a lot on the blog. I mean, like Chris Carson's contract's running. What if they'd have drafted Jonathan Taylor or Clyde Edwards-Helaire or DeAndre Swift or Cam Akers or whoever, in the last draft, then that's a hole you don't have to address now. And, it's a position you don't have to address. Or they could have drafted a cornerback, maybe. I mean, that wouldn't happen with the Seahawks. They don't draft cornerbacks early. Or they could have drafted a left guard or a center. There were centers in the draft. Move up a couple of picks to get Cesar Ruiz instead of moving up half a round to get Darrell Taylor. It's that kind of sort of thought process. It's like there was no planning ahead at these positions. You added a linebacker. So now you have to make that the planning ahead. That has to be the sort of, you've drafted Jordan Brooks. So that I'm afraid the $18 to $20 million contract that Bobby's on for the next 2 years has to go. And as much as we all love Bobby and he played well, no one would doubt that he didn't have a decent season. But it's not worth 17 million this year, 20 million next year, I'm afraid. It's just not. I mean, that's the kind of money that you pay a top elite pass rusher. That's not a middle linebacker salary. And I'm just not sure that Jordan Brooks playing every week as a second-year player rather than a rookie next year with the knowledge of the system is not going to lead to some huge, enormous, death-defying drop-off. That actually you might just be fine. And if the O-line can create a few more longer drives or put a few more points on the board, and for me, it's just like, what does Pete want to be? Does Pete want to just keep his guys around? Or does Pete want to really go for this? He's probably got like 3-4 more years left to really go for this now with Russell and his age and him and his age. And it's like, there's no such thing as a happy ending in the NFL. We see it, maybe Tom Brady will have one, but most players just finish in a place they don't want to finish without the success. Drew Brees, you felt like there was a story to be written there, rides off into the sunset after winning a Super Bowl, and he's played it. You carrying on playing, and maybe he'll play again next year, Robbie, who knows? But it doesn't happen that way. And part of me thinks it's just time to get what you can for Bobby and Jamal. It's just, you write it off, just get what you can and get, make your savings. And look, this draft it's pretty good for offensive linemen. You could get a guard or a safety. You could sign one in free agency. You can get a receiver or a tight end in this draft. That's just the way I would go. Anyway, that's the Seahawks. It's a conversation I'm sure we will have again.
I think I'll say one more thing real fast just on the Bobby thing. I think if you drop Bob or if you trade Bobby, you ain't bringing back Richard Sherman. I just don't think he'll come back if Bobby's not here. I just don't think that would be. I think realistically, I don't think Richard would want to do that. I just think they're probably too close of friends, and I just think he wouldn't want to be, and I just don't think he would come back.
I disagree. I think that Richard Sherman, the biggest priority for Richard Sherman is Richard Sherman. And I think Richard Sherman would want to come back. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee that he will, but I think that Richard will want to come back to finish the way he wants to. And I think that he sees the Seahawks as his team. And he's kind of made his point with the Niners now. And he will come back to home and will want to finish a Seahawk. And I'm not sure that he needs to come back to play with certain players. I actually think if they moved Bobby and said to Richard, we've moved Bobby Wagner, we need you to come in and lead this defense, that actually that would appeal to Richard Sherman. But we'll see. I mean, listen, we can talk about this. I think people sometimes conflate a discussion about what maybe should or could happen with an opinion on what will happen. I have no idea whether Bobby Wagner will get traded or not, or Jamal Adams. You know, I wouldn't put money on it. Let's just put it that way. But I feel like it's a conversation worth having. And I think the people who just want to shut these conversations down and go, well, it's not going to happen, is it? Nah, what you're talking about? You know, they need to shut up, because what's the point? What are we going to talk about then? How else are you going to create money? They're $-2 million for the season so far. You know, what are you going to do? What, you pick your poison then? Are you cutting Carlos Dunlap? Are you cutting Jaron Reed? Are you trading one of those guys? Something's going to give. Someone's got to go. You know, you ain't raising $25 million on extending contracts and restructuring contracts. You get a few mil, but you're not going to get to where you need to be to sign the players that you need to fill the holes. You've got half your team, like tight end, center, left guard, cornerback, Sam linebacker, you know, number 2 defensive end. I'm number 3 receiver. There's probably others that are missing here out of contract. You have to replace these guys and the depth players that you're going to lose that you signed on 1-year deals. Yeah, I need some money. Someone's got to go, and they're going to have to go, and you're going to have to get back in this draft. People say, "Oh, the draft, no, man, the draft." The draft's the best way to replace players on the cheap. You had a right guard this year earning what? $1 million? And how much value did you get from that? Because he played brilliantly. You need a few more of those. You know, you need to get guys in who can perform for too many. If you drafted Najee Harris or Javonte Williams in round 1, their salary would be $2 million this year. That's less than Carlos Hyde. They could fix your running game. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. You know, you've got to find the value. Anyway, we have a whole off season to talk about this, and as it goes along. I would just say, a lot of people say, I can't see this happening. The Seahawks are never dull. They are never dull. They always keep you guessing. Who would have thought that they would have traded for Jadeveon Clowney and then just let him walk after a year? Who would have thought they'd trade for Sheldon Richardson and let him walk? Who would have thought they'd cut Percy Harvin a year after trading for him? Who would have thought that they'd try and turn Jimmy Graham into a complete tight end when he was never such a thing? You know, we can run through the list. Who would have thought they would give a contract extension to Michael Bennett in December 2016, and a year later would be paying him to play for somebody else? That is what happened. They got rid of him a year after his extension because they didn't want him around anymore. So they're dead. They took a huge dead cap hit. They do things, and people were saying back then, they aren't going to get rid of Michael Bennett. It's going to cost too much. They paid him to go and play for the Eagles. They paid him to go away. So don't tell me they won't trade Jamal Adams if he wants $20 million a year. Anyway, that's that. The big story in the NFC West, Robbie, is Matt Stafford is joining the LA Rams from the Detroit Lions. It's a huge trade. The Rams, allergic to first-round picks. What was your reaction when you heard the news?
I was a little surprised by the amount of draft capital given up. I mean, they give 2 firsts and a player. I mean, that's a lot, for Matt Stafford. And I just didn't really expect it. I think Stafford's a good player. He's fine. I think he's better than Goff. I think it makes them better, but I don't know if that's the guy that I don't know if that's the guy if I would, hang my hat on to help me win the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he's never won a playoff game. I mean, if I was them, I would have went all in on just, on Watson instead. I mean, in my opinion, give up an extra third or an extra first and a third or something to make it to sweeten the pot. But I mean, that's the guy I would have went after. I don't think I would have went after Stafford just because I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. He's not anything that he doesn't like scare me. I think he does make them a little bit better. I think he has a better arm and I think he might do really well in McVay's system, but I don't know, man, he seems pretty stiff. He doesn't really move the pocket around and I don't know. He's not a mobile quarterback. He doesn't make me nervous the way like Kyle or Murray makes me nervous. You know what I mean?
So I had kind of mixed views on it because I think it is an upgrade, and I do quite like Matt Stafford. Stafford's one of those players who you kind of wonder how they would have performed in a team that is not the Lions. How would his career have been if he'd have ended up in a different franchise, different organization, different support team. I mean, it's not like he didn't have players around him. I mean, at one point they had Ndamukong Suh and Calvin Johnson and Stafford and they had an opportunity to draft Aaron Donald and Odell Beckham Jr. and they took Eric Ebron. So they've had opportunities and missed opportunities, and they got to the playoffs that time, and the Seahawks beat them, and Stafford was injured a bit for that game. I'm interested to see how it goes because I think from a pure arm talent point of view, there's very few quarterbacks that have entered the league in the last 15 years with Stafford's pure talent, and he's clearly tough. And he will test teams in a way that Jared Goff never would. I mean, what you've got now is, Stafford is quite mobile and he can get out and he can do a lot of the bootlegs that the Rams like to do and get the quarterback on the move and shift the pocket. But if there's an option to throw it downfield, Robbie, he will be able to do that now. And he may bring a new dynamic to this Rams offense. I mean, I had a look at the PFF grades for quarterbacks this year. And Jared Goff was ranked 22nd. In between Drew Brees and Cam Newton, and just a little bit ahead of Andy Dalton, and below people like Daniel Jones and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, Matt Stafford was, he wasn't in the top 10 or anything. He was 14th. He was a smidgen behind Kyler Murray and a smidgen ahead of Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson. And that's kind of what I think, you are getting. I think you are getting somebody who is capable of playing at that level, that Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray level that they played at last year, Matt Ryan type. I think that's what he could be. Now, the question, I think it's trouble for the Seahawks, Robbie, because I think that they have such a problem playing the Rams in the first place that an upgrade at quarterback is going to make life harder for them in those matchups. It's not going to be easier than when they had Jared Goff playing, for example. I'm just not sure whether Stafford's got it in him to lead the Rams to the Super Bowl. That's kind of the thing. It's whether or not, they're banking on him now to get them back to the big game. I wouldn't rule it out. I'm just not sure whether he's that good, but I do think he is good enough to cause the Seahawks a hell of a lot of problems against a team that they have really struggled against over the years.
And any quarterback the Rams seem to throw out seems to play well against the Seahawks. It doesn't really matter, I guess, at that point. Like their defense gets after us, and they can run the football well. But yeah, Stafford makes them better. I think he's an upgrade over Goff. In my opinion, I think the Lions got the better end of the deal. But yeah, I mean, this is a huge trade, and it makes the NFC West even more tough than it was last year. And this is where we have to make a lot of right decisions. One of the things that the Rams do well is they may trade away a lot of their first round picks, but they hit a lot on the later round picks. They do a really good job of drafting guys that seem to fit their system and play well for them in the later round. So, if we can start doing some of those same things, I think we can offset that, and, hopefully it won't be that big of an issue.
Well, yeah, I think there's something to be learned from the Rams, without wanting to go back to the topic we've just gone over and over and over again on, is where have they invested? They've invested in Aaron Donald. They've invested in a quarterback. They've invested in their receivers. They've invested in Andrew Whitworth to play left tackle. That's kind of where their money goes. And then they fill in holes. So they lose Clay Matthews and they lose Dante Fowler. They go and get a Leonard Floyd on a one-year deal and they just plug him in there, for a few mil. And he cost as much as Bruce Irvin, I think, last year. I mean, younger and better. And no disrespect to Bruce, who everybody loves, but he just is. And I don't think if Bruce had played a full 16 games, he would have got the sacks that Leonard Floyd had and the impact that Leonard Floyd had. They'll go and draft a linebacker who's quite fast, and they'll just plug him in there. They'll go and draft safeties and plug him in there. They'll go and draft players and just fill holes. And what have they done? They've really prioritized sort of like the key positions on the offense, and they want to run the ball. So they go and draft a running back with talent early, and they've got the receivers and they pay them, and then they go and get Jalen Ramsey to shut down whoever they're playing's best receiver, and they've got Aaron Donald, and of course they were never going to let him go because he's one of the greatest players ever to play the game. But the structure of where they actually spending, it looks quite reckless, doesn't it? They're constantly trading these picks, but I'm not sure if in 5 years' time anyone's going to turn around and go, well, Jalen Ramsey wasn't very good, was he? Or Matt Stafford wasn't very good, was he? People will go, well, actually, in fairness, they've got some quality for those picks, some proven quality. And the other first round pick, was it Brandon Cooks? They got a second round back for him, so it was kind of a wash anyway. So I'm not sure that they've been that reckless at all, and I think they back themselves to fill holes, and that's, for me, is what I would like to see the Seahawks doing now. It's like to say, okay, what are our priority positions? This is what is our vision? What is our identity? Who do we want to be? Okay, that's where the money's going. That's where the picks are going. Where are the positions we can fill holes and use our scouting and our coaching to draft and develop? There, and there. I think that's been the key to a lot of the Rams' success over the years, Robbie. That and the fact that their coach is clearly very, very good.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that just sort of kind of, if I'm being honest, just it pissed me off because they gave up 2 firsts, a player, and then I think and a third, and then that's exactly what we gave up for Jamal Adams. So I think for me it was, I think I wrote it on the blog after you did that, and when after the trade happened, and I was like, okay, I'm convinced now. Let's trade Adams, just because like if we can get anything remotely close back to that, like we gave up way too much, and it just was a tough pill to swallow after. So it kind of was, on one end I was like, well, I think the Rams got the Rams got an upgrade at quarterback, but I think the Lions got better of the deal than when you start looking at the terms of the actual agreement, you're like, man, we just gave the same thing for a blitzing safety, and it's incredibly frustrating that we gave up that much for a safety. So yeah, I mean, it's the NFC West is going to be tough anyways. Like even if Goff would have stayed, it would have been tough. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play. I really think that this our schedule is a lot harder this year, so we're going to need to we need to figure some things out. I'm really interested to see how our new offensive coordinator does, and how this offseason goes. It's going to be one of those a lot of talking points for us, I think, this offseason. I think it's one of those things where we have a lot of things to discuss, because you're right, the Seahawks don't shy around with things. They'll make moves, and it'll be see what John has up his sleeve.
It's just you spelling it out there. It's just incredible to think again how much they spent on Jamal Adams. And it was never talked about in those terms that it would even cost that much. It was always like a first rounder plus another pick, and it ended up being 2 firsts and a third and the player for a 4th in return. I have no understand how it ever got to that point, other than sheer desperation on the Seahawks' behalf. It doesn't make any sense to have traded that much for a safety, however good Jamal Adams is. And no one would say he's a bad player, but yeah, for me, I just, as I said before, I think they've just got to get out of that deal and just move on and invest elsewhere. We'll finish with this, Robbie. It is Super Bowl weekend. I can't say that I'm entirely excited about the Super Bowl. I never really am when it's not the Seahawks, which is more often than not, let's be honest. But it is happening, so we should predict it. So what is your Super Bowl prediction for the Chiefs versus the Bucs?
I went back and forth a little bit on this. I mean, I think the Chiefs, they had a couple like COVID scares, but it sounds like they're going to be fine and be back to play. And then they have some injury on that offensive line. At the end of the day, I don't know. See, even now I'm struggling because it's hard. Like for me, I just haven't thought the Bucs been that good all year. So I'm watching them play. I'm just surprised they're there. But you can't can't argue against Brady, right? He is the GOAT. So it's hard to pick against him right now, but I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs as the favorites, which feels a little wrong normally I like to go for the team that's not predicted to win, but I have a hard time rooting for Brady. So, I don't know, man. I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I think they're probably going to pull it out, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Brady could do it either. So, but I'll pick the Chiefs.
See, as we mentioned before, I don't actually mind Tom Brady. I mean, I think there are aspects I like about Tom Brady. I know that, and I think the main reason people don't like him is because he's just such a damn winner. And I always kind of respect people who have had the success that he's had. On this occasion, though, Robbie, I don't think he's going to win, and I think the Chiefs are going to win fairly comfortably. I think that you're right. I think the Bucs have they've done ever so well to get to this point and have won some really tough games, and it's their home stadium, and maybe a bit of Brady magic can get this through. I just don't see the Chiefs doing what the Packers did, digging a hole for themselves and having to try and scramble the way out of it. I just don't see Mahomes and co getting into those situations, which in fairness, that is what Mahomes and co did a year ago against the Niners. They dug themselves a hole, but they're not coming up against Bosa and company this year. And I think they're just going to be too strong. I actually think I could imagine the Chiefs getting out to quite a comfortable early lead. Maybe the Bucs fighting back a little bit in the second half, but never quite getting within touching distance of the Chiefs, and the Chiefs somewhat comfortably winning. And if the Chiefs win 2 in a row, the league better watch out, because they ain't going anywhere for a while. With a great coach, a great quarterback who may end up being the best ever, even better than the guys playing this weekend. Unbelievable weapons, a defense which is complementary. They are a superpower in terms of a team, and they've only really lost one game all year, and that was against the Raiders. The other one that they lost was when they played the backups. So I think the Chiefs are going to win, and get ready, because you are never going to stop hearing about Patrick Mahomes after it's happened. But they are great, and you have to respect greatness, and they are great, and the Seahawks are a fair bit off them, as are everybody else in the league. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the next NFC team to get a chance to knock them off their perch may well be the Seahawks. But it may well be that if you're going to win the Super Bowl in the next 5 years, you're going to have to beat the Chiefs. So we'll see how it goes this weekend. I'm going to go for a big Chiefs win, though. So that's as far as we go for today. We will jump on if there is any breaking news about the Seahawks. We will continue to talk about the big talking points as well. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe to the channel. Again, there's only about 20% of you who are watching the videos that have actually subscribed, but then you'll never miss a video. And there's some really good stuff. There's a great interview with, if I say so myself, I probably shouldn't say it's a great interview with myself, with Quinn Miners, who was the star of the Senior Bowl from Wisconsin Whitewater, who is
I'll say it was a great interview.
Well, he was a great guy.
It was a great interview.
And an unbelievable guy to speak to. Off air, I told him I want the Seahawks to draft him, and he was very keen on joining the Seahawks. So let's make it happen. But we'll have more of those. More interviews to come, more podcasts. You won't want to miss any of that. Please subscribe. Please check out those interviews. Watch the other videos. Don't forget to like this video as well. It helps just push it up the pile and get it up there, and more people will check it out. Thank you for your support. More analysis on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. But for now, we'll see you later.